My name is Daniel. I'm just a guy who pours coffee and clears tables at a small diner on 7th Street. Nothing glamorous, nothing grand, but it pays the bills. Barely. I've been working here since I dropped out of college 3 years ago. Life didn't quite unfold the way I imagined it would when I was a kid. But I've learned that sometimes doing small things with kindness matters more than chasing big dreams that no longer feel reachable. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, the kind of day when the city feels slow, gray, and a little bit sad. Most customers were regulars, people with their routines, their usual booths, their preferred coffee orders. I had just finished wiping down a table near the window when I noticed him. He walked in quietly, like he was trying not to disturb the world. Man looked around 70, maybe older. His gray hair was matted from the rain. He wore a red coat, torn at the sleeves, fraying at the edges. It looked like it had once been warm, but now it barely held itself together. The man's shoes were scuffed, his hands trembling slightly. As he moved, I didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable, so I approached with my usual smile. "Morning, sir," I said gently. "Coffee?" He looked up at me. His eyes were kind but tired. "Just a coffee, if that's all right." "Of course." I didn't mention the prices. I didn't ask if he had money. Something told me not to as I walked back to the counter. I felt a nudge in my chest. Not guilt, not pity. Something else. Something that said, he needs more than just coffee today. So I poured the cup, grabbed a fresh muffin from the counter, and slid them onto a plate. As I returned, I placed both in front of him. He looked at the muffin and then at me. "I didn't order that." "I know," I said. "It's on the house." The old man hesitated. I can't pay you back." "You don't have to." I smiled. "Let's call it an early Christmas." He chuckled softly, then whispered, "Thank you, son." That simple moment, a cup of coffee and a muffin, changed something. Not in the world around me, but inside me. He stayed for a while, long enough to finish the coffee, warm up, and rest his hands. I checked on him once or twice but didn't push conversation. I didn't know his story and I wasn't going to ask. Some people come into your life like storms, loud, disruptive. But he was like fog, soft, slow, almost invisible, but heavy with unspoken things. Before leaving, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled dollar bill. He placed it on the table. "This is all I've got," he said. "But I want to give it anyway. Kindness should be honored." I tried to push it back. "Please, you don't have to," but he insisted. "No, keep it. One day you'll understand." "Why?" He walked out into the rain and I watched him disappear into the mist like a forgotten ghost. That should have been the end of it. But a WSN single quotes T. 2 days later, a man in a tailored suit walked into the diner. I noticed him because he didn't belong. This was not the kind of place that attracted men in custom Italian shoes and Rolex watches. He walked straight to me. "Are you Daniel?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me an envelope from Mr. Roth. I blinked. "Mr. Roth? The man you gave coffee and a muffin to." I opened the envelope and froze. Inside was a check for $50,000 made out in my name. No strings, no explanation. Just a simple note that read, "Sometimes the richest hearts are found in the poorest pockets." "Thank you, Daniel." I didn't know what to think. Was this a joke? Was he real? Was I on some kind of hidden camera show? I looked at the man in the suit. Who is Mr. Roth?" He smiled faintly. "You'll find out soon enough." And with that, he left, just like the old man did, but everything had just begun. I don't remember locking the diner's front door that night, or scrubbing down the last chrome napkin holder, or even counting the till. All I remember is staring at that check, its creamy paper heavier than air, the ink glossier than common. Sense as if it were a feather tipped in lightning. $50,000. From a man whose sleeves were ripped, whose coat carried the scent of rain and neglect, whose trembling fingers had tried to tip me a single crumpled dollar. I slipped the envelope inside my apron pocket like a guilty secret and walked home through wet streets that glittered under neon. Every time a car's headlights hit me, the wind felt colder, as if the night itself was interrogating me. "What will you do with it, Daniel? Truth?" I had no idea. One. A wake-up call with no alarm the next morning. I woke before dawn, my brain still chewing on the check like it was stale gum. I brewed cheap instant coffee in my shoebox apartment, sat on the only chair I owned, and stared at the note again. Sometimes the richest hearts are found in the poorest pockets. Who writes lines like that? I muttered. I turned the check over, half expecting a disclaimer. Just kidding, nothing. Only a watermark so crisp it looked like moonlight frozen in paper. Could have paid off every cent of Mom's medical debt right there. I could have registered for night classes, fixed the hole in the bathroom ceiling, maybe even bought a second chair. But something in my gut whispered, wait for what? The answer came an hour later when my phone buzzed. Unknown number? Daniel Hayes? A woman's voice asked, smooth, almost lyrical. Yes? I represent Mr. Roth's legal affairs. He wondered if you'd accept a meeting. My stomach tightened. Is he all right? A soft chuckle. He's in excellent health for a man his age. He'd simply like to thank you in person. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Penthouse Suite, Meridian Hotel. Will you come? Penthouse, Meridian. Those words didn't belong in my reality. But the check was still on my table. Reality had already been bent. I'll be there. 2. The man behind the curtain. The Meridian was the kind of place whose lobby ceilings could hide entire constellations, whose flower arrangements cost more than my month's rent. I'd ironed my only button-up shirt twice, but I still felt like a coffee stain come to life. A concierge escorted me to a private elevator with brass doors, polished to the arrogance of mirrors. 37 floors later, I stepped into a living room larger than the diner. Sunlight draped itself over Persian rugs and leather sofas like royalty in repose. And there, standing by a wall of glass, was the old man. Though old suddenly felt like the wrong word. In daylight, his eyes gleamed steel blue, his posture proud. The torn red coat was gone, replaced by a charcoal sweater that looked softer than forgiveness. He turned, smiling as if we were childhood friends meeting after decades. Daniel, thank you for coming. I found my voice. Mr. Roth. I don't understand. He waved a hand toward 2 armchairs by a fireplace whose flames whispered more quietly than secrets. We sat. Between us lay a low table bearing a French press, 2 mugs, and a small plate of muffins, the same brand our diner sold for $1.14 apiece. I ordered these for nostalgia, he said, noticing my stare. Nothing tastes quite like kindness. My cheeks warmed. Sir, I can't accept that check. It's too much. He studied me, really studied me, until I wondered whether he could read all my unfinished dreams in my eyes. Tell me. He finally said, why did you refuse my dollar? I opened my mouth, but words dribbled out like leaky plumbing. Because you looked like you needed it more than our diner did. A single dollar? He chuckled, but not unkindly. Would that one bill have changed my life? I shook my head. Exactly. Yet you let me keep it. Why? I didn't want you to feel small. His gaze softened, and for a second he seemed older again, weighed down by memories that hadn't yet spoken. Do you know how many people have wanted to make me feel small? He smiled, but his eyes were somewhere else. Too many to count. Yet you protected me with nothing to gain. Without warning, he leaned forward, voice lowering to a warm rumble. Son, I have billions. But I walked into that diner because I was hungry for something my money can't buy. A reminder that humanity isn't entirely transactional. The fireplace popped, scattering sparks like punctuation. Your kindness, he continued, prove that I can still be seen, not as a wallet with legs, but as a man. I swallowed. Anyone would have done what I did. No, he said firmly. Most would have waited to see if I could pay. Many would have ignored the torn coat, or judged me, or in some cases refused. Service entirely. Kindness without calculation is rarer than diamonds, Daniel. He leaned back. Which is why I test for it. My pulse stumbled. Test? He explained that once a month, he went out alone in disguise, nothing more than thrift store clothes and time to kill testing strangers' generosity. Most days, he said, humanity passed with a calmness. I earned his first A+ in over a year. I'm dying, Daniel, he added quietly, almost as if confessing to the flames. Not imminently, but soon enough, stage 3 kidney failure. I have doctors, of course, but they fix organs, not regrets. He paused, letting the words weigh the air. I built empires, but I lost the map to my soul along the way. Your coffee and muffin reminded me where to look. He folded his hands. So I'm making amends, finding good people, equipping them to do good things. I sat numb. A small part of me suspected a fairy tale. A larger part felt the truth humming behind every syllable. 3. Currencies that don't fit in wallets the next hour blurred into conversation. He asked about my mother's medical bills. I found myself explaining her lupus, the insurance denials. He asked about my father. I whispered that Dad had walked out when I was 13. He asked about my dreams. I laughed awkwardly and then, somehow, talked about finishing college. Maybe opening a community cafe that hired veterans and single moms. He listened the way deserts listen to rain. Greedily, gratefully, as if stories were water. Occasionally he jotted notes in a small leather journal. Finally he said, I can pay your mother's bills. I nearly protested. He raised a hand. Not charity investment. You invested in a stranger's dignity. Consider this my interest. Payment. Tears hovered but didn't fall. I managed a nod. And your cafe? He pressed. Tell me the first thing you'd need. A microloan maybe. Around 20 grand for the lease deposit. He scribbled on a sheet of heavy stationery, folded it, and slid it across the table. That should start you off. I unfolded it. A certified bank draft for $250,000. My vision blurred. Open something beautiful, he said gently. But promise me you'll keep one item permanently on the house for anyone who needs it. I promise. My voice cracked like thawing ice. 4. Re-entry into the ordinary. World. Leaving the meridian felt like exiting a spaceship onto the wrong planet. Sidewalks looked duller. Passers-by seemed trapped behind invisible walls of worry. I clutched the bank draft in my jacket, half afraid it would evaporate. I paused outside my mom's apartment building. 3rd floor windows glowed with the cheap blue of daytime TV. She didn't know I was coming. She didn't know rent was 3 weeks late. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time. Mom opened the door in a faded robe, lupus rash blooming on her cheeks, eyes tired but always, somehow, smiling. Danny, you working a double today? Called in, I lied. And then, because my voice failed, I just hugged her. She smelled like chamomile tea and determination. We sat at her rickety kitchen table as I explained everything, well, almost everything. I told her about the old man, the check, the meeting. I left out the medical prognosis. She didn't need extra fear. Angel visits come in disguises, Mom whispered, crossing herself. She touched the bank draft with trembling fingers. Maybe you were the disguise this time. I spent the rest of the afternoon on hold with billing departments, my jaw aching from saying, yes, paid in full, over and over. When the last clerk confirmed a zero balance, I sank onto Mom's couch weightless. Still, a new weight replaced. The old one, expectation. Money doesn't erase problems. It writes new chapters in bolder ink. 5. Storm clouds over secure skies that night. The diner's neon flickered like a nervous tick. I clocked in for the evening shift, apron pockets suddenly heavier with possibility. I hadn't told anyone, not owner Maggie, not cook Jose. Secrets felt disloyal, but how do you announce, hey, I'm funding a dream cafe with money from a disguised billionaire I met 2 days ago? Halfway through the shift, 2 suited men eased into a corner booth. They ordered black coffee, no sugar. They didn't smile, didn't chat. Their eyes scanned the room as if measuring it for curtains. Made of silence. When I poured refills, one glanced at my namatag, then exchanged a look with the other. Something cold crawled down my back. Minutes later, Maggie poked her head out from the kitchen. You got a call. Line 2? I wiped my hands, lifted the receiver. This is Daniel. A gravelly voice. Stop seeing Roth. Who is this? Click. The dial tone buzzed like an open wound. I turned. The 2 men were gone, their booth empty except for a $5 bill folded into the shape of a dagger. For the first time since I met Mr. Roth, fear eclipsed awe. 6. The price tags on miracles. By closing time, thunder rattled the diner windows. Jose offered me a lift, but I declined. My thoughts needed rain. I tugged my hood up and headed toward the subway, footsteps splashing in every puddle on 7th Street, halfway to the station. A limousine eased up beside me, tire spray haloing its headlights. The rear window lowered, revealing Mr. Roth, face paler than morning ash. Get in. He urged. Inside, the leather smelled of cedar and secrets. I buckled up as the driver's same man from the diner earlier pulled away. Daniel, Roth began. I should have warned you. My family's complicated. Not everyone approaches philanthropy with open hearts. His gaze drifted to the raindrops streaking the glass. They think kindness is a liability. They fear I'll give away the fortune before they can sink their claws into it. I remembered the dagger-folded bill. Your relative sent them? Roth's silence was answer enough. Lightning split the sky. Thunder chased it like regret. My time is shortening faster than my doctors predicted, he said. I need an executor who understands generosity. I blinked. Are you asking me? He nodded. I've watched my heirs squander every lesson money could have taught them. But you, he tapped my chest with a trembling finger. You see wealth as a tool, not a throne. My heart ricocheted against my ribs. I'm a waiter with no degree. Labels mean nothing, he said softly. Integrity is the only credential kindness requires. The limousine stopped beside my apartment. He pressed a new envelope into my hand. Read it. And please think before you answer. I stepped into the rain, watched the limo vanish into the night like a promise I wasn't sure belonged to me. I opened the envelope under a street lamp. I hereby name Daniel Hayes as co-executor of the Roth Charitable Trust, effective immediately upon my passing. Below, his signature curved like a final blessing. 7. Dawn doesn't ask permission to break the dark sleep never came. I paced my apartment, the shadows counting my steps. Was this destiny or a detonator? Would accepting paint a bullseye on my back? Could I navigate a minefield of billion-dollar grudges with a waiter's map of the world? At 4 a.m., exhaustion pinned me to my mattress. In the thin pre-dawn hush, I remembered something Mom used to tell me when I was a kid, terrified of thunderstorms. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Danny. It's loving something enough to walk through the fear. I love the idea of a world where kindness didn't need disguises. I loved the man who had believed in me faster than I'd ever believed in myself. And I loved the thought of using money to heal instead of hoard. So when dawn bled gold into my bedroom, I sat at my tiny table, grabbed a pen, and scrawled one word on the back of Mr. Roth's letter. Yes. I tucked it into an envelope, sealed it with a piece of tape, and felt the world shift like a giant safe unlatching. Little did I know, opening that door would invite storms, bigger than any thundercloud, and miracles brighter than sunrise. The morning after I wrote, yes, I dropped the letter off at a discreet courier service Roth's assistant had recommended. The clerk, a man with gold-rimmed glasses and the voice of someone who never lost his temper, sealed it like it was a nuclear code. I watched him handle it with sterile gloves, log it into a digital ledger, and whisper "priority secure" into a headset. That's when I realized I wasn't in the world I grew up in anymore. Something had changed, and things were about to get much stranger. 1. The man in the blue scarf. It began subtly. First, there was a man in a blue scarf sitting across from the diner every day for a week, always reading the same newspaper, always glancing at his watch at 10:30 a.m. just as I clocked in. Then, a black sedan began idling 2 blocks away, engine always running, its windows dark like secrets. Finally, I received a voicemail from an unknown number. "You've made a powerful decision. Daniel Hayes. I hope you're ready for the consequences." No threats. No name. Just that low, smooth voice that carried both elegance and danger. I tried to play it cool, go to work, serve customers, crack jokes with Maggie and Jose like nothing was different. But paranoia doesn't clock out. Every clang of the bell over the diner door jolted me. Every unfamiliar face became a potential enemy, and yet I kept going because Roth believed in me. And because someone had to carry his legacy if his blood relatives wouldn't point to the Roth family reunion. Exactly 1 week after I accepted Roth's offer, I was invited to what his assistant called a discreet family gathering at his estate outside the city. Discreet was an understatement. The Roth estate looked like someone tried to combine Versailles with a high-security government bunker. Gated, guarded, and manicured to intimidating perfection. The kind of place where the fountains were programmed to dance and the hedges were trimmed into perfect geometry. I arrived in a loaner car his staff had sent. I wore the nicest thing I owned. A navy blazer, a tie borrowed from Jose, and dress shoes I bought secondhand. I still felt like a lamb stepping into a room full of wolves. Inside, I was led to a large study with cathedral-high ceilings and stained glass windows that made sunlight look judgmental. They were already there. The Roth heirs. 5 of them. Maxwell Roth, the oldest son, hair slicked back like he'd been born into money and had never left it. A corporate shark in a suit that probably cost more than a year of my wages. Celeste, the Ice Queen daughter, all pearls and poison, sipping espresso like it insulted her. Victor, the middle child, eyes sharp as broken glass, jaw always clenched. And the twins, Rachel and Richard, who looked like mirror images of inherited boredom and entitlement. They stared at me like I was a waiter who had walked into their opera box, which, to be fair, I was. "You're the coffee boy," Celeste said without looking up from her cup. "I'm Daniel," I replied evenly. "Right," Richard muttered. "The pet project." Maxwell cleared his throat. "Let's be frank, Mr. Hayes. We're here because our Father, God bless his fading mind, has decided to entrust you with authority in his charitable trust. And we're here to challenge it." I blinked. "Challenge it? Legally," Victor said. "Emotionally, publicly, however it needs to happen." Rachel leaned forward. "You're not family. You're not qualified. You serve muffins." "And coffee," I added with a smile, trying to keep my voice calm. Maxwell stood and walked over to a tall bookcase, pulling out a black folder. "This," he slapped the folder on the table, "is a dossier on you. Your education, your debt, your mother's health, your roommate who got arrested for shoplifting 2 years ago." I swallowed. They had done their homework. "And then some. But," Maxwell continued, "it also includes your work ethic, your spotless employment record, and the fact that you refused to take a tip from a man who looked like he had nothing." He looked at me then, really looked. "My father has never spoken highly of any of us, but he talks about you like you're Moses come down from the mountain." I didn't know what to say. "I don't trust you," Maxwell added, "but I don't entirely hate you either." That was probably the nicest thing anyone said that day. 3. The hidden vault after the meeting. Mr. Roth's assistant, a woman named Elise, led me through a back hallway to a small door behind a bookcase. Inside was a narrow staircase, descending into a softly lit basement. "You're not just here to represent Mr. Roth," Elise said as we walked. "You're here to protect him." "From what?" "You'll see." At the bottom of the stairs was a small, secure vault room. Inside, there was no gold, no treasure, just folders. Dozens of them, each labeled with names, places, years. "Every one of these," Elise said, "is a record of a person Mr. Roth helped quietly. People like you. Waitresses, janitors, street performers, single moms, refugees, recovering addicts." I ran my hand across the spines of the files. "Why keep all this down here?" "Because the world doesn't respect anonymous generosity," she said. "They call it weakness. He calls it purpose." That night, I sat with Mr. Roth in his library, looking over some of those stories. One man used his gift to start a homeless shelter. Another woman became a lawyer, who now defends abuse survivors for free. A teacher in Detroit built a scholarship fund for inner-city kids, with just a $10,000 start. "I want you to keep the work going," Mr. Roth said, his voice thinner than before. "Even after I'm gone." I nodded. "I will." He smiled weakly. "You're the first person I've trusted in 20 years. 4. A target on my back, but trust comes at a cost. The threats escalated. One morning, I found a brick on my doorstep. Taped to it was a photo of my mother. Someone had followed her to her pharmacy appointment. I reported it to the police. Nothing happened. Elise installed security at my apartment. We moved my mom into a safer complex under a different name. Still, the danger never fully went away. It became clear the Roth heirs weren't just annoyed. They were threatened. My existence endangered their inheritance. They didn't just want me removed from the trust, they wanted me erased. One night, Elise sat me down and handed me a burner phone. "If something happens," she said, "press and hold 1. We'll come. What do you think is going to happen? I think you've already stepped too far into a war you don't understand." She paused. "But you've also done something none of them have ever done." "What's that?" She smiled. "You made Mr. Roth feel human again." 5. The gift that keeps giving. Despite the chaos, I kept working part-time at the diner. People asked why. Why stay in a greasy spoon when I could be building empires? Because that diner was where it all began, and I wanted to remember. I started a journal, cataloging each life I was able to impact through the trust. A teenage single mother we helped relocate and educate. A veteran with PTSD who opened a bike repair shop. A foster kid who learned how to code and just got hired at a startup. The stories grew, and with them, my sense of purpose. But so did the tension with the Roth family. They filed official challenges, tried to block my co-executor. Status. Held press briefings claiming I was emotionally manipulating a vulnerable elder. And through it all, Mr. Roth stayed by my side, even as his health worsened, even as his voice thinned and his skin paled, even as the world began to whisper that the old man had finally lost his mind, trusting a waiter over his own blood. 6. The collapse before the rise. The breaking point came on a cold November night. I arrived at the Roth estate after a panicked call from Elise. Mr. Roth had collapsed. I ran into the house, up the marble stairs, and into his room, where a nurse was already checking his vitals. He looked small, fragile. The man who once stood tall in my imagination, now curled beneath a sea of blankets, each breath a trembling whisper. He opened his eyes. "Daniel, I'm here." He smiled. "You've done more with one act of kindness than I've done with decades of wealth." "Don't say that." He gripped my hand. "You must finish the work. Promise me." "I promise." A tear slid down his cheek. "I wish I had a son like you." And then he closed his eyes. His hand went still, and for the first time in years, the richest man I ever met found rest. Mr. Roth's funeral was small, surprisingly small for a man with global influence, billion-dollar portfolios, and his name etched onto hospital wings and university libraries. But that was how he wanted it. He'd left instructions. No press. Number. Politicians. No distant relatives who hadn't spoken to him in years. Just a handful of people he had personally helped. People like me, whose names would never be printed in Forbes, but who had stories forever altered by one old man's decision to care. He was buried beneath a maple tree on the edge of his estate, a place where the wind carried leaves like memories and silence fell with dignity. I stood there with my hands in my coat pockets, staring at the fresh mound of earth, heart still aching from the last words he'd spoken. "You must finish the work." Those words weren't just a request. They were a torch, and I had just inherited the flame. 1. The reading of the will. 2 days later, I was summoned back to the estate for the formal reading of the will. The Roth family arrived in sleek black cars, wearing darker expressions than their suits. They sat in the grand study, arms crossed, eyes cold, waiting to collect what they assumed was rightfully theirs. I sat off to the side, trying to blend in with the drapes, still feeling like an intruder in a world of oil paintings and marble. Floors. The family attorney, Mr. Carlton, stood at the front of the room and cleared his throat. "By Mr. Roth's wishes, we will now begin." The first 10 minutes were predictable. Victor got shares in Roth Energy. Celeste received control of several properties overseas. Rachel and Richard were granted limited partnerships in boutique holdings. Then Mr. Carlton paused. And finally, as per the codicil added 6 weeks ago, he looked at me. Mr. Daniel Hayes is named co-executor of the Roth Charitable Trust with full authority to direct its operations, approve projects, and allocate funds per the philosophy outlined in Mr. Roth's handwritten legacy letter. The room exploded. Maxwell shot to his feet. "This is outrageous." "He's a waiter, for God's sake." "He's a stranger," Celeste barked. "A stunt." "I want to see proof this wasn't forged," Victor snapped. Mr. Carlton remained composed. The codicil was signed, witnessed, and notarized in accordance with state law. Challenges can be filed, but until then, Mr. Hayes holds authority. Maxwell turned toward me, eyes burning. "This isn't over." And I knew he meant it. 2. Trust fund. No trust. The following weeks were a blur of boardroom tension and backroom battles. The charitable trust that Mr. Roth had built, valued at over $900 million, was suddenly under my stewardship. I reviewed ongoing projects, vetted pending proposals, and answered dozens of emails from schools, hospitals, food banks, and NGOs. I also received death threats. An anonymous letter told me I was in over my head. A voicemail warned that accidents happen to nobodies like you. Elise advised me to travel with private security, but I refused. Roth had walked among people without bodyguards, so would I. Still, it was exhausting. And lonely. The media soon caught wind of the story. Headlines flooded the internet. Waiter inherits control of billionaire's fortune. Cinderella story or con game? Who is Daniel Hayes? Paparazzi stalked the diner. Reporters hounded my mother. Even old schoolmates reached out, pretending we were close. The pressure mounted, but I stayed focused. Every morning, I wrote 3 things in my notebook. Protect Roth's vision, stay human. Don't let them change you. 3. Letters from the forgotten one. Evening, I was sorting through the mail delivered to the trust's temporary office. Amid stacks of legal letters and press requests was a small bundle of handwritten envelopes tied with twine. No return addresses. Each one began with, "Dear Mr. Roth." I opened one and began to read. "I don't know if you remember me, but 10 years ago, you gave me a grant to start my bakery. I now employ 14 people and host weekly bread drives for the shelter next door. I never got to say thank you, so thank you for believing in someone who had never been believed in before." Another, "Your scholarship saved my daughter from dropping out. She's now a pediatric nurse." Another, "Because of you, I lived." Tears welled in my eyes. I sat there for hours, reading story after story of quiet transformation. Mr. Roth had spent decades moving through the world like a shadow, leaving light behind, and I realized my job wasn't to replace him. My job was to continue him. 4. Showdown, but the Roth heirs didn't give up. They filed a lawsuit, challenging my legitimacy as executor. They hired PR firms to spread rumors. Some outlets published false claims that I had manipulated Roth in his final months. I stood in court, in a suit that still smelled faintly of diner coffee, while the family's legal team painted me as a schemer. He was emotionally vulnerable, they argued. He was manipulated by someone with no credentials. He was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. My lawyer stood and responded calmly. Mr. Roth was dying, but not confused. He knew what he was doing when he entrusted Mr. Hayes. This wasn't about money. It was about values. Then he handed the judge the bundle of letters, one by one. They were read aloud. The courtroom fell silent. When it was over, the judge delivered his ruling. The court finds no basis to revoke the terms of the trust. Mr. Daniel Hayes remains its lawful co-executor. It was a win, but it didn't feel like victory because the attacks didn't stop, they just changed. Tactics. 5. The turning point months passed. The trust flourished. We launched a youth entrepreneurship program. We rebuilt schools and neighborhoods. Long forgotten. We funded mental health clinics, clean water projects, and emergency shelters. And slowly, the noise faded. The Roth heirs turned to their portfolios. The press moved on to the next scandal. And I began to feel something unexpected. Peace. Started sleeping again. My mother smiled more. The cafe I'd always dreamed of. We broke ground in the spring. It would open as a pay-what-you-can community hub, just like I told Mr. Roth I'd build. We named it the Red Coat, in memory of the man who walked in poor and left me richer than I ever imagined. 6. One more letter on the anniversary of Mr. Roth's death. I received a final letter from Elise. She had been cleaning out his study and found it tucked inside his journal. It was addressed to me. I opened it, hands trembling. Dear Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I hope you're still kind. I hope you're still choosing compassion over convenience. I hope you haven't let the world harden you. I never had a son, but if I did, I'd want him to be. You don't measure yourself by wealth. Measure yourself by impact. Count hearts, not accounts. And never forget, the smallest acts often echo the loudest. I'll be watching, but more importantly, so will the world. Live well. I folded the letter and placed it in a glass frame on my desk, right beside the first dollar he ever tried to tip me. Not because it was money, but because it was the first moment. I saw who he really was, a billionaire searching for someone who could see past the suit, the legacy, the legend, and just treat him like a human. That's all he ever wanted, and that's all I ever gave him. It had been 1 year since Mr. Roth's funeral, 12 months since I'd been handed a check, a title, and a burden disguised as a gift. But the more time passed, the more I understood. This wasn't just about money. It was about belief. Not in systems, not in legacies, but in people, in strangers. In doing the right thing even when no one's watching, and still, someone was watching. One, the return of the fire had happened on a Wednesday. Had just finished hosting a free breakfast at the Red Coat Cafe, the community kitchen we built with part of Roth's trust. Every Wednesday was pay what you can day. Some paid in quarters. Others paid in stories. Some couldn't pay at all, and that was the point. As I stepped outside to greet an elderly woman with arthritis and a bright red beanie, I noticed smoke on the horizon. Thick, black, ugly, and it was rising from the direction of the Roth Foundation's new education center, a project we just launched 6 weeks earlier to train underserved youth in business, coding, and soft skills. I dropped everything and ran. By the time I got there, fire trucks were already battling the blaze. Flames roared through the roof. People stood watching in horror. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Elise!" I called out. She emerged from the crowd, eyes wide, hair damp with sweat and smoke. "Arson," she said grimly. "Deliberate. Accelerants were found." The building wasn't just on fire. It was targeted. Too. A message in ash later that night, once the flames were out and the press had cleared, the fire marshal pulled me aside. "There's something you need to see." He handed me a scorched envelope they'd found inside the main office. Beneath the ashes of my desk. It was sealed with wax black, cracked from the heat. Inside was a card, written in block letters. "You were warned. Stop playing hero. This empire doesn't belong to you." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I knew where it came from, and I knew why. Because the more good we did, the more people like them lost their grip on the illusion that wealth was a birthright. We were breaking that illusion one scholarship, one free meal, one coffee at a time. They wanted control, but Mr. Roth had already given it away. To me. And they couldn't stand it. 3. Rise from the rubble. We held a memorial for the education center the next day. Not because of lives lost, thankfully. No one had been hurt, but because of what it represented. Hope. Opportunity. Second chances. The community came out in droves. Former students, volunteers, parents, donors, even strangers who had simply believed in what we were building, stood on a makeshift stage of crates and plywood and faced the crowd. I wasn't dressed like an executive. I wore my old diner apron charred at the edges, stained with time, because that's who I was. And who I still am. "I won't lie to you," I said into the mic. "We're hurting, but fire doesn't end a story. It starts a new chapter." And Mr. Roth didn't teach us to fold. When things get hard, he taught us to build again. People clapped. Some cried. Others nodded. And then something incredible happened. A young woman named Jenna, who'd been homeless 3 years ago, but had graduated through our job training program, walked up and handed me an envelope. Inside was a crumpled $20 bill. "I want to help rebuild," she said. And just like that, the donations began pouring in, not from corporations. Not from investors, but from ordinary people. A single mom gave $5. A barista handed over her weekend tips. An elderly war vet donated his late wife's ring. By nightfall, we had raised $38,000, and by the end of the week, $600,000. People didn't just want to watch us Rebuild. They wanted to be part of it. 4. The final confrontation, Maxwell called a meeting, said he wanted to talk peace. I didn't trust him. Not anymore, but Elise urged me to go. If we don't confront this, she said, they'll just keep hiding in shadows. So I went. The meeting took place in one of the Roth family's old boardrooms, dark mahogany walls, leather chairs, oil paintings of ancestors who probably never smiled. Maxwell sat at the head of the table, flanked by his siblings, cold, composed, condescending. I see the fire hasn't slowed you down. He began. No, I replied, folding my hands. It lit a bigger flame. He gave a small, bitter laugh. You know what you are, Daniel? You're a virus, infecting the name we built with idealism. I stared at him. And you're the reason Mr. Roth looked for hope outside his own bloodline. He stood. We built this empire. No, I said calmly. He did. You inherited it. I earned it. Silence. Then I pulled out a flash drive and placed it on the table. Every cent I've spent, every project, every recipient. Fully documented, transparent, clean. They glanced at it like it was poison. You came for me with rumors, fire, fear, and I'm still standing. Maxwell clenched his jaw. You think this is over? No, I replied. I think this is just beginning. 5. Rebirth. A new education center opened 6 months later. Bigger, stronger, fire-resistant materials, solar-powered, equipped with a tech lab, creative arts space, and free daycare for student parents. On the front wall, in steel letters, was a quote from Roth's last letter to me. Count hearts, not accounts. The grand opening was broadcast live. And for the first time, people saw what the Roth fortune could really do when placed in the hands of someone who didn't care about yachts or status. Just change. 6. Boy at the window. On the first day of the new semester, I arrived early. I walked the halls quietly, just observing. Students laughed in the lobby. Volunteers passed out breakfast. And then I saw him, a young boy, maybe 10, standing at the window of the cafeteria. Alone. Nervous. I walked over. First time here? I asked gently. He nodded. My mom said this place gives free food. Is that true? I smiled. Yes, always. He hesitated. Even if we don't pay anything? Especially then. He looked down. She doesn't like asking for help. I knelt beside him. She's brave for coming, and you are too. I handed him a muffin and a cup of hot cocoa. He held it like treasure. As he walked away, I felt the lump in my throat swell, because he was me, years ago, hungry, hopeful, invisible, until one man in a torn red coat sat in my section and let me be kind. A year had passed since the fire. 2 years since I paid for that one small cup of coffee. And now, everything had changed, but one thing had not. Kindness was still the most powerful currency I had ever known. 1. Full circle. The Red Coat Cafe had become more than a cafe. It was a community. A heartbeat. A gathering place where the invisible became visible and the forgotten were remembered. Every week, people wrote thank you notes and pinned them on the wall of grace. Because of this place, my son is back in school. I found my first job here in 8 years. You reminded me that I matter. I still wore my apron sometimes, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because I never wanted to forget the boy I used to be. The one who looked at people like Mr. Roth and thought, that life isn't for me. But he made it for me. And in return, I was making it for others. Too. The book. One afternoon, Elise handed me a leather-bound journal. On the cover, For the Waiter Who Changed Everything. Inside were stories, dozens written by people the Roth Foundation had helped since I became executor. A girl who survived a domestic violence shelter and went on to become a trauma counselor. Reformed inmate who now ran a program teaching Financial literacy to at-risk teens. A blind boy whose custom laptop helped him become the top scorer in his district. Each page was a life changed, not by grand gestures, but by small doors being opened. Mr. Roth's vision had never been about headlines. It was about ripples. And now, those ripples were waves. 3. A letter from the government. Then came the letter that stunned me. It was from the Department of Human Services. They wanted to replicate our model, the Red Coat Cafe Plus education hub in 30 cities across the country. They asked me to speak at a national summit on sustainable social equity models. Me, a former waiter, the son of a grocery store cashier, the boy who once didn't have enough change to buy dinner for his mom. When I stepped onto that stage months later, I didn't talk about economics. I didn't talk about investments or portfolios or market impact. I told them one story about an old man in a torn red coat and a young waiter who gave him coffee just to be kind. 4. A visit to the grave. On the 3rd anniversary of Mr. Roth's death, I visited his grave again. The maple tree had grown fuller. Its shade was gentle, its roots stronger. I sat cross-legged beside the stone and spoke softly. I wish you could see it, sir. What we've built, what you started. The wind rustled the leaves like a reply. You gave me more than money. You gave me permission to dream bigger than I ever dared. I placed a folded note on the grave. It read, I kept my promise. And I always will. 5. The documentary. That winter, a documentary team asked to feature our story. At first, I refused. I wasn't interested in the spotlight, but Elise reminded me, it's not about you. It's about showing others what's possible. So we said yes. The documentary was called One Cup of Coffee. It followed our journey from the diner to the boardroom, from threats to triumph, from fire to rebuilding. It aired globally. People wept. Donations surged. And most importantly, new volunteers came in droves saying, if he could do it, maybe I can too. That was all I ever wanted. 6. The last chair. Years later, the Red Coat Cafe expanded into a national model. Dozens of locations. Thousands of lives touched. And in every location, there was one empty chair. Always the same. Vintage leather, red fabric. A slight tear on the armrest. No one sat in it. It wasn't reserved out of formality. It was sacred. It was his. Because long before the world knew him as a billionaire, he was just a man in need of warmth. And long before I ever imagined myself a leader, I was just someone offering it. Epilogue. The Kindness Empire. Years later, Forbes did a story on our work. They called it The Kindness Empire, How One Waiter Became the Most Trusted Man in Philanthropy. The headline made me laugh because I still didn't feel like a mogul. I still fixed the jammed printer myself. I still poured coffee for guests on slow days. I still hugged grieving mothers who came through our doors, but I accepted the honor. Not for ego. For example, because if the world knew a simple act of kindness could build an empire, maybe it would inspire more of them. Final words. When people ask me what Mr. Roth gave me, they expect the answer to be wealth. They're wrong. What he gave me was a map, a road from the ordinary to the extraordinary, a belief that decency is not weakness, that generosity is not foolish, and that sometimes the greatest empires are not built on steel or gold or blood, but on one cup of coffee and a kind word.